Okay, thank you, Thomas. A couple of quick reminders. Make sure those phones and pages are set to silent, and to mention who you are when you pick up the microphone to ask a question. Also, webcast request. Speakers need to stay between the green lines, please, or you become invisible, or you have a slide instead of a head. Anyway, okay, next up is Adrian Kennard, who's going to be talking about some of his operational experiences with using more than one wholesale DSL provider and treating the internet as a utility.
Oh, good afternoon, everyone. When I thought about doing this talk, I was thinking more about how the internet is changing, and it's gradually becoming more of a real utility for customers than it has been. And I was amazed how short a time other utilities like electricity have actually taken to go from sort of public street lighting to something we just rely on now. It's an amazingly short time. But what I've really concentrated on here is the reliability aspect. So that's what I'm going to try and cover today. If you think of a utility, the main aspects are that we can all get it, it's nice and standard, and it's the same everywhere. But one of the key things is reliability. We expect our power to just be there. We expect our water to just be there. So how do we do that for a broadband service? How do we make a reliable broadband? Now, obviously, the real answer is just for people to get leased lines and fibers and stop messing about with something like broadband. But we can do it, and we can do a lot better than just using BT. The lesson we've learned here is we've been using BT exclusively for 9 years now. And, well, we were. And we've seen broadband go from very limited coverage, the very first broadband services that came out something like 9 years ago, and a few geeks and a few businesses using it, and everyone else using dial-up, and we've seen it turn into something that everybody has now. When talking about it as a utility, it really is everybody has it now, and a business just has to have their internet connection. I was amazed someone told me the other day there's an Amish website, and I was thinking that doesn't make sense, but yes, apparently there is. So really every business needs an internet connection now. It's quite amazing. But until quite recently, we have thought about the problems with broadband as being in the last mile, the actual copper. And generally that was the case. Relying on a copper pair in the ground is tricky. It gets wet, it breaks, it gets interference, RF interference, and so the solution to that was to suggest to businesses that they have 2 lines. And obviously we wanted them to have 2 lines with us, but even if they didn't have 2 lines with us, they had 2 broadband lines that were connected through BT, because as we know, they're not technically a monopoly, but there are places where BT is the only choice. And that's worked well. We've had plenty of customers where they get a fault in a line and we switch all their traffic just to one line and everyone's happy. Unfortunately, 21CN has changed this. And we've all heard of 21CN, and I would like to take the opportunity to apologize to all of you, because a few months ago I stood up in front of you and said 21CN's working, it's really quite good. Had some teething problems, but it was. We were really happy. And we know as an ISP we lead the way with these things, and we jump in feet first and learn how to swim later. But 21CN's scaling up. BT have got literally hundreds of thousands of lines now on 21CN, and they're realizing how to run a network again. Or not. And what we're seeing now is the most common outages are not the copper anymore. What we're seeing is outages that affect a whole exchange. Well, there might not be outages, problems like huge packet loss or latency or constantly dropping PPP sessions, but problems generally. hitting whole exchanges at least, BRASs, which cover multiple exchanges, metro nodes, which cover huge swathes of the country. There's basically 20 metro nodes, but some of them cover a large percentage of people, some of the ones in London. And the latest shock with this is not just outages and problems, it's planned work. Anyone who follows the BT planned work announcements will have realised that if you have WBMC, then there are single points in BT's network which mean just to do a software update on their Cisco routers, they have to take out service for huge chunks of the country for 3 to 4 hours at a time. Now, they do it at midnight, admittedly, but of course, customers with 2 lines, they'll both be out. The topology is such that, unlike the old 20CN days, you couldn't have 2 lines on different RASs. You're on the same RAS, you're in the same metro node, because you're on the same exchange. So it's almost impossible to avoid these outages. So this came as a bit of a shock, and we've decided you can't rely on one provider. So this is a slide I threw in at the last minute, well, on Tuesday as it happens. Are BT really that bad? Now, I've promised some people I'm not going to just stand here and keep saying BT sucks, BT sucks, BT sucks, honest, but you all know this. We're hoping BT are actually going to learn from this and get better. And in fact, doing talks like this, we're at the stage of embarrass BT into doing something, because we've tried everything else. And we know there are problems, and I'm not pulling punches. But Tuesday the 8th, this Tuesday, I was at the BT Tower with a lot of other ISPs. And fortunately, I had my 3G dongle. I hadn't upgraded to Snow Leopard then, so it still worked. And I was able to work out what was going on. And other ISPs were coming up to me and asking me what was broken today. Not asking BT, because BT didn't know. There was something like 7 separate outages. Most of them were quite short. An entire BRAS would go off for 10 minutes for no apparent reason. Some of them were quite long. There was one issue that affected 159 customers for about 7 hours. And it was eventually fixed. And it's a recurring issue. It's not always the same customers, but it's an issue we've seen several times. And we know that top people in BT, and some of you might know Dick and Ken, they go around with a cape, I think, and yeah, not sure, but they're very good, and they take this seriously, and they are sorting these things out, and they're dealing with vendors, and we're very pleased with them. We talk with them a lot, but they're stuck with a design which has single routers in it. They're stuck with issues that break, vendor problems. Been an issue. We're not a scale to do LLU ourselves. I'm not going to send people running up to some exchange in Scotland because something needs resetting. So we deal with people like BT with a wholesale product. And a lot of ISPs do, even much bigger than us. So we were quite pleased to find that literally weeks ago, B have started doing wholesale services through Fluidata, and they were very easy to deal with. So I'm just going to run through some of the aspects of using B as a second provider so that you've got an idea about whether that's sensible for you. Firstly, the interconnect. Anyone who's dealt with BT knows that BT interconnects have got a bit easier. But even so, with a WBMC circuit, you're looking at 2 WES circuits, 30 to 60 day lead time, assuming there's no digging. And that's, of course, even if you're in a data center. The costs, of course, I think most of us know what WESs cost. They're not cheap. Whereas with B, we went and had a meeting and discussed it with them, and I decided to sign the paperwork on the spot. Within a week, we had our first customer online. And the only reason it took a week is it takes that long to sort out jumping in BT. We'd actually placed the order within hours of signing, and we got Telehouse to run a couple of Cat5s because they're present in the data center, in lots of data centers. And bingo, we're online with B. So that was stupidly easy and not particularly expensive either. Commercial aspects. Now, I know this is more of an operational forum, but it's worth mentioning. We do actually have a slight problem with the commercial aspects. B are too cheap. With B, you actually have quite a low line cost. It's sort of anything from like £6 to £8, depending on where it is in the country and what you're doing, but it's quite a low line cost for the basic line. But the bandwidth is silly money. If you don't know, it's something of the order of 150 quid per megabit a second per month for the IP Stream Connect stuff, which is just silly. We've always had the discussion with BT, how on earth can people like Level 3 or above net route packets to the other side of the world for under 10 quid a megabit with no problem and with guarantees, and BT can't get it to exchanges the other side of the country without it being best efforts and costing a fortune. But that's how BT are. With B, the line costs are more expensive. Not hugely so, but we're in a market where people worry about their broadband costing them more than 10 quid a month. And of course, AAISP don't try and compete in the really low-end market, but the B lines are a bit more expensive. But the bandwidth isn't. In fact, I'll let you know what the bandwidth costs. Nothing, which is rather nice. Now, we still have to pay for transit, so we can't just say to people, you can have completely unlimited lines and no one will whinge at all, because we'll get all the people who really want to fill those lines 24 hours a day. So we're still looking at bandwidth costs, but it gets a bit tricky when we've got customers with B lines and BT lines, either bonded or fallback. How do we manage that? The previous talk was about capacity planning and fallback. Well, that has an interesting point. What if we have thousands of customers who are using their B line, but the BT line sat there as fallback, and B break? Well, suddenly they're all on BT. So the only way that works is if we're paying BT for that unused contingency bandwidth. So we've got to charge our customers for the bandwidth the same as we do on BT. So a bit unfair. But this is where the commercial things get a bit tricky. And now, because I run the company, I have to make these decisions as well. So it's an interesting point. Moving on, coverage. As far as we know, B have got about 80% population coverage. I haven't worked out what that is in number of exchanges, but it's quite good. It's not likely to get bigger, though. The whole economics of LLU means they're probably not going to unbundle some exchange on an island in Scotland somewhere. So BT will always be there, even if only as a sort of stopgap, fill-in, last resort ISP. So you can't get rid of BT. I'm sure some people would like to, but we're not trying to get rid of them, honest. So that's quite good. Now on to the more technical things, which I know you're all more interested in. Router configurations. Well, we need to have more of a talk with B and see how flexible they are on this. One of the problems we've got is we can't just migrate someone over to B, because if we do, they'll go offline. And that's because their router configuration is completely different. BT use PPPoE, VCMux, Norton 38, and B use PPPoE, LLC MUX, Norton 101, and also have a limited MTU, although that is planned to increase soon. But they are different. Now, since doing these slides, we've been experimenting with the cheap Zyxel routers, and I'm pleased to say it is actually possible to configure them with two active WAN interfaces at the same time, and actually configure B and BT on the router simultaneously. And it works. I can just move the cable from a B line to a BT line, and it syncs up and logs in, and back again. So we'll be working on our automated scripts so that customers wanting to move over, if they've got a suitable router that we know about, we can set them up in advance. And when the day comes and their jumping happens, they go off for a few minutes and then come back on, and they're on B. And that's going to be nice. It's not as seamless as if they had the same config as BT. That would be lovely, because then we could just sort of migrate 5,000 customers next week. BT would love that, I'm sure. But it is a help that we can do that. I've hinted on MTU on the last slide. MTU is a bit of an issue. We've always used 1,500 bytes clean MTU on our network. So we've never had to worry about MTU issues. And we've been doing quite a few experiments and serve our customers. It's amazing how many bits of the internet are just broken. And we were quite shocked. And we were actually puzzled at how it's solved, and we discovered. But basically, there are loads of banks that will do path MTU discovery and then firewall the ICMP. So they just don't work if you're using less than 1,500 bytes. There are plenty of firewalls that don't like fragments, so we'll have customers getting fragmented packets and not knowing what to do with them. The solution is very simple. You fudge the TCP in the SYN packets. Now, apparently this is what people do. No one told us, but so now we know this. That's what we've set up, and that's how we're doing the B lines. Of course, if you've got a B line and a BT line, you kind of need to set both the same. Otherwise, the SYN might go down the BT line and not get fudged, and then the path MTU discovery trying to come up the B line doesn't work. So it's something to bear in mind. The good news is B are talking about increasing this, but they are talking about baby jumbo frames somewhere, and we're not sure whether it's something that the routers will cope with or not, and we'll find out the hard way soon. So we might be stuck with 1492 for a while. One of the interesting prospects of this is line bonding. Now, we do per packet load balancing based on line speed as part of our Fabric FP6000 router. This works very well, and obviously the faster lines get more packets than the slower ones, and you can get some packet reordering, which generally things cope with. Well, we've got a customer who had 5 BT lines. They were all about 8 meg sync, and he bonded those, and interestingly, on 21CN, I said capacity is an issue. He could wipe out Kidderminster, basically. He could download enough that every other line on 21CN in Kidderminster had horrible packet loss while he was downloading. He could fill the backhaul capacity in one go, all by himself. Quite worrying. Dick and Ken were very quick to fix it, but it's an issue in BT to understand capacity planning and monitoring. They clearly thought they'd put enough bandwidth in and hadn't. So hopefully that'll be addressed. He moved 2 of his lines to B. He's now got 2 lines that are syncing at about 14 meg and 3 lines that are doing about 8 meg. And bonding them together and downloading like 50 odd meg in one go, megabits a second constantly, quite happily. And it's just working, and we're quite surprised, but it works. So one very happy customer there. Of course, he doesn't wipe out Kidderminster now, which is just as well. DLM, favourite subject of a lot of people. Now, I'm sure BT think the DLM is a lovely idea. For those that don't know, it's dynamic line management. It fine-tunes the DSLAM settings to try and get the best out of your line, but maintain it stable. It's a nice idea, it's a nice concept, but actually we think it's not working well. And in particular, 21CN DLM is different and works really badly, from our opinion. We have lots of customers whose lines aren't getting the best they could, and who are actually suffering more outages because the DLM has changed their settings so their router has to resync, than if they had packet loss or outages because the DLM was wrong. Their lines are going up and down, changing constantly, and having problems. Now, admittedly, it's probably a small percentage of customers that have this, but it's a problem. The way B work is completely different. They don't have a DLM. They give us control of the profile on the DSLAM, or ISAM, or INSAN, or whatever you're going to call it these days. And we can change that. And unlike BT, it doesn't take a working day to do that. We can just tweak the profile until the line's stable. Now, the default is sensible and just works for most people. But if someone's not happy, or we've got some amazing customers who are, there must be overclockers as well, because their whole objective is to get every megabit a second they can out of their line, and they'd probably buy gold-plated connectors and sacrifice chickens if they could get it going faster. And they love it, because they can just set it on 3 dB and no interleaving and go as fast as you can. But other people, of course, mostly businesses, want a stable and reliable connection. And they can go in and set it at a higher margin. And then it just stays there and works. And it's interesting, we're not sure whether it's going to be a bigger support headache or a less one. We think less because we've actually handed the controls to our customers on our control pages. And they can tweak it. Now, the less technical ones can phone us and say, my line's not right, and we can look, and yeah, bit of packet loss, we'll put the margin up. And we do it instantly, and we see it's fixed it. So it's an easy tech support call. But we think by passing the problem over to our customers, they get to choose whether they want a faster line that occasionally has packet loss, or whether they want a slower line that's always stable, or what. And they can just change their mind at a whim, and they don't need to hassle us at all. And we think it's going to eliminate an awful lot of faults. So taking us out of the loop with that, we think that's going to work. But it's not a model BT do at the moment. Now, interestingly, they are considering our SOR to actually allow us to control the DSLAM. And they're only doing this on the second attempt because we've mentioned the competition. So, are B reliable? Oh, sorry. Are B reliable? Well, actually we don't know. We've only been using them a few weeks, but so far they seem to be. I think I've had one fault, which was a fault on the exchange, and they were very good at sort of telling us what's happening, and someone's going there to reset it, and then they think they found what the cause was, and so on. All done by email, but they seemed very professional and sorted our customer out very quickly. But are they reliable? Well, we don't know, and to some extent we don't care anymore. We've taken the reliability question for our supplier out of the loop and said we'll have 2 suppliers. we can give someone a B line and a BT line with fallback and bonding and whatever arrangement of IPs they want between the two, and if one breaks, the other one just works. And so it doesn't matter anymore. We've taken two potentially unreliable suppliers, although, as I say, B seem to be reliable. We've taken two potentially unreliable suppliers and made a high availability broadband service that we can offer to our customers now. So that's the whole point of what we're doing. And operationally, it's proved to be relatively straightforward. So in summary, 9 years with BT exclusively. We checked the dates, so it was amazing it was that long. We were one of the first broadband providers. And 21 CNs tipped us over the edge. It's been the last straw. It has broken so many times and caused so many problems that we've had to decide to use someone else. What do we want to come out of this? We want to see BT going back to being a credible supplier. We want them to actually realise there's things not working and that someone's got to do something. But it will need people considering competition. It will need them risking losing lots of customers before some director levels in BT wake up and realise they actually need to think about this and sort it. And we're hoping that's going to happen, because then we'll have two quality providers and we can offer a combination to our customers that's going to give everybody the best service and a real utility service that's just going to work for everyone. Okay? Any questions? You need the microphone. Testing.
That's better. Well done, sound man. So, Adrian, it looks like you've taken 9 years to decide what everyone knew 9 years ago.
Oh, thank you.
Other than that, so far be it from me to defend BT.
Feel free. I do it quite a lot, actually, but yeah.
So don't get me wrong. I actually personally have a BT 21 CN line for a variety of reasons, and I've seen a few issues with it. But I think you're being slightly unfair to them. If you look at, so first of all, would it be nice to have seen some numbers in the presentation? How many issues you have in? How often are they? What is the SLA that BT actually commit to you? You know, and actually, because what you've put up there is a great presentation, but all it says to me is BT suck. And as I said, I've known that actually since 92. And you know, you compare it to B, and again, I've got colleagues that run that, and it works. It's fantastic. But in terms of the scale, you say it's free, and the backhaul they're not charging you for. You know, I guarantee you that at some point in time, that's going to change, because I know how much it costs to dig to these BT locations. I know how much it's going to cost them at some point in time. And when that step change happens, unless they've got a tree growing money somewhere, it's going to come back and impact you. So I think, I mean, great summary that you've got something that gives you a bit higher availability, but I'd like to see more real numbers behind it, because not just from the pure fact of defending BT, but so we also offer an LLU service at C&W, and it'd be good to understand what you're looking for so that we can build to that. But the impression I get is the routers don't work right, but you could pay for more. The bandwidth's not good enough, but you could pay for it, and you know what it sounds like to me is you want everything for nothing.
Okay.
And unfortunately, doesn't quite work like that sometimes.
No, I've obviously come across as just sort of whinging about them, and I didn't mean to entirely come across as just whinging about BT. I don't have any exact numbers for you. The bandwidth congestion is not what's happening at our end. It's not the bit we pay for, and we do up that as we need to have enough bandwidth. The congestion's happening in various bits of BT's core network, and the fact that they charge so much for bandwidth would make it so that you'd think they could afford to make sure that the bits in their network were up to capacity. The SLA one's a good one. The SLA we get from BT is not particularly good in terms of what it actually guarantees. Well, in fact, the SLA is generally not a guarantee, it's just a target. And we've actually had this discussion with BT, because when we raised issues with packet loss and latency that were really making people's lines unusable, we got told there's no SLA for packet loss and latency. And they're right, there isn't. But the big issue here is, comparing it with 20 CN on BT, it's crap. And yes, they could say, yes, and that's what we've agreed to provide you with. And we'll say, thank you very much, goodbye. Which is not what we're saying. We're saying they should be able to make it as good as it used to be, as good as 20CN used to be, and they should be they're charging enough money that they ought to be able to do that, and we'd like to see BT improve. Sorry, I don't have any exact figures.
So just, I mean, compared to 20CN, so bit by bit, has the price changed? So before you were buying up to 8 meg, now you can buy ADSL 2 plus. Bit for bit, has it changed?
How do you mean the price?
Yeah. So if you're buying,
the
buy 2
21CN
meg
is
on
actually
20,
a bit cheaper. Yeah,
right.
the bandwidth on the 21CN is a bit cheaper. Yes,
okay.
Granted. But the part of the issue is things like IP Stream Connect has the same issues, and that's the same bandwidth cost as 20CN. So, and other aspects are not just sort of whinging and saying there's outages. Things like the fact that the Metro node connections for WBMC are a single box design. They're a single big Cisco router at each Metro node, not dual routers with redundancy. And they've admitted that to us, and they're now vaguely thinking about doing something about it. And that seems just a poor network design. And I think they should be really embarrassed about that.
So I kind of agree on that. But I mean, there are other single points at DSLAM that you plugged into. I was interested in a bit about where you run multiple copper lines. Typically, in my experience, on an 8-pair DP into a house, in fact my own, for example, if I have an issue on copper, it's affecting all of them. Doesn't matter which provider's at the other end of it.
We found quite a lot of cases where it's only one line. It depends what it is. I agree.
To something else, DSLAM card, something like that.
Whichever. Okay. Anyone else?
Thank you.
Is that it? Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Adrian. Now, I'm pleased to see we have lots of RIPE NCC people here. Next presentation is from Phyllis Yilmaz. Phyllis has done this before. She periodically gives us an update on the RIPE policy process. So, over to Phyllis. Yep.
Hello people, Filiz Yilmaz, RIPE NCC Policy Development Manager. Yeah, I've done this before.